So it's a real privilege to be here speaking with you tonight, because a lot of you have been involved in the environment movement or the social justice movement for much longer than I have. So I applaud your efforts in working towards a more sustainable and peaceful future. I think that we share this vision of a society where not everything revolves around personal gain, where communities have a voice that is heard, where governments govern for the good of all of the people and not just a select few, and where their concern is for our children's future and not just their own re-election. Throughout history, there have come times when people were confronted by terrible threats: wars, disease, famine, floods, and each time they had a choice. Mostly they chose to fight the war or to shun the diseased, or to hope and pray that once they'd gotten over the latest crisis, there wouldn't be any more floods or droughts. They chose not to change. But now and again in history, and not very often, people chose to see beyond that immediate threat. They realised that what they were doing was causing the crisis. It wasn't just punishment from the gods or bad luck. And once they realised that they were the cause, that was the first step towards solving the problem. Now, despite their recent stance on whaling, the Japanese understood this 400 years ago, when their lands were plagued by floods and by drought because they'd cut down all the trees in the mountains. They chose not to blame the deforestation and its effects on someone or something else. Instead, they forced rural landowners to replace every tree that they'd removed and to replant the others, and the floods and the droughts stopped coming so often. And today, Japan is one of the most heavily forested, industrialised countries in the world. The world understood this 20 years ago, when the ozone layer was threatened by human-made chlorofluorocarbons, which were used in air conditioning and spray cans. Within 2 years of the Antarctic ozone hole being discovered, 43 nations had agreed to phase out CFC production. And today, global ozone depletion has stabilised, and we hope to see it turning around in the next few decades. I think now that we're at another such point in history. I believe that now is the beginning of a turning point when our children and their children and many generations after them will look back and see that we had a choice and that we chose to act. The crisis that we face is climate change. And like the floods which afflicted the Japanese or the CFCs that built up in the atmosphere, it too is of our own making. The answers to it are also within our control. They're within our power and our technologies. But we need the political will to impose them. We know that wind power works. We're learning that hot rocks work. We know that solar panels work. Biomass plants, they're not science fiction like clean coal. They're here now. We've got one up at Rocky Point and it's working quite well. We've got all these technologies and many others which can save us huge amounts of greenhouse gases. Things like trains and buses, not cars. They can dramatically cut our fossil fuel use, and we've had them for centuries. We know that with the price on carbon and the removal of fossil fuel subsidies, clean, truly green renewable energy will become more affordable in the near future. And we know that renewable energies and public transport could provide tens of thousands of jobs for Queenslanders, as well as safeguarding our precious Great Barrier Reef from massive bleaching, which will be caused with more than a 2-degree rise. And yet, if you listen to Premier Beattie's speech not 2 days ago, or John Howard's speech on the same day, when he once again refused to commit to targets for greenhouse reductions, you'd be left thinking that clean coal or nuclear was the solution, and that renewable energies and emissions reduction targets, well, they're impractical pipe dreams and they're going to leave our economy in tatters. Clearly, the old parties have not understood, or they don't have the will, to make the choices that we need to make for our planet to survive. They don't understand that you can't have an economy without a planet. Now, this may make some of you despair, but my message tonight is one of hope, because I believe that the Greens stand within a hair's breadth of controlling the Senate and influencing the direction of this country's climate change policies. Now, if enough of you and enough of your friends and neighbours and family and the rest of Australia tick that green box on your ballot paper in the Senate, then you'll have made that choice to put the lies and the fear and the denial about climate change behind you. Yeah. Thank you, Noel. Now, if that happens, and I believe that it will, we will have taken that first step on the road to a sustainable future. The road to a future where we can be confident of leaving the world in a better shape than it was when we inherited it. A future in which funding goes not to unproven technologies to prop up toxic industries like coal and nuclear, but to clean, green, renewable energy, which Australia has in abundance. A future that is job-rich, with public transport, renewable energy and sustainable ecotourism, the new boom industries, taking over from a dirty coal industry. A future that has rejected nuclear power, uranium mining, nuclear waste, and the devastation and suffering that's caused by nuclear bombs. A future where we say no to 14,000 US troops playing war games using deadly depleted uranium munitions in our internationally significant wetlands at Shoalwater Bay. Instead, it's a much safer world because we've created just relationships with other countries and we're working to end global poverty. It's a future where the huge gap between rich and poor in Australia is closing. It's a society which values its citizens enough to provide access for everyone to good quality healthcare, affordable housing, and participation in decision making. It's a future where we save our precious water, reuse and recycle it at the local level, and value it like the liquid gold that it is. It's a future where our native forests are safe from being wood chipped, where our mighty rivers can still flow free, and where ancient creatures like the lungfish are not under threat of extinction from dams that never filled up. It's a future where the Indigenous people of this land no longer struggle for recognition of their land rights, and they've been given an apology and just recompense for the stolen generation and stolen wages. It's a future where Indigenous life expectancy, employment and education are the same as non-Indigenous standards, and where reconciliation has moved from the hearts of many into reality for all. It's a future where each of us has meaningful employment, where our rights in our workplaces are respected and upheld, and where no dismissal is unfair. It's a future where we don't lock up men, women and children who are fleeing persecution, and where we don't allow our citizens to be detained in inhumane conditions for years on end without charge. It's a world where everyone has access to free education and the opportunities that that brings. And it's a world where our rural and regional communities are not dying. In fact, they're thriving with sustainable industries, sustainable agriculture, and rewards for the environmental services that they're providing. And finally, it's a world where there is honesty and accountability in government, and where our representatives take a long-term view of what's best for us, for the planet, and for the generations to come. So friends, Queensland needs a Green voice in the Senate to keep the focus on these real issues and to stand up for a just and sustainable future. Now, it feels like the tide is turning, and this year is your opportunity to have your voice heard. Labor can't get the numbers to rescue the Senate, but the Greens can. So if you share this vision for a sustainable future that we have, then vote Green in the Senate this year, because your children will thank you for it.